the bottom of it with your host Joshua Moriarty.
How you doing out there, ladies and gentlemen? Hello, welcome back to the bottom of it with me, your host, Joshua Moriarty. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for tuning in, clicking the button, putting your headphones on, turning me up in your car, stereo. It's great to have you. Thank you. Hey, today's episode is with a very special guy, Dhani Harrison. I bloody love that guy. He is a wonderful man. I think it's good to have him. It's good to have him around. He was laying, I think he was not laying low, but he had a band, the new Number 2, which was him and a close friend of his, and then he had Fistful of Mercy with Ben Harper and Joseph Arthur, but he hadn't gone out as himself as Dhani Harrison, so he has just released his first solo album, In Parallel, it is called, under the name of Dhani Harrison. He's ready to embrace the name. And, I think he's feeling good about it. We sit down to talk about all of that. What else did we talk about? Talked about Westworld a lot. I enjoyed Westworld a lot myself as well. Going full retard, self-realization, Star Wars. Dhani likes to go deep. He's a thinker. He's definitely a man who is very educated about all sorts of wild and wonderful theories and everything. And I respect that. I like your style, Dhani. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Dhani Harrison, enjoy. Did you enjoy the Radiohead song at the end of Westworld? Do you even remember?
Oh, what? Fake plastic trees?
Nah, it's the one. Wake from your sleep. No,
I didn't. Was it on the piano?
What's the name of that song? Off OK Computer.
Is it Street Spirit, or was it one of those ones?
Nah, it's the fucking terrifying one. It goes boom, and it's got the big distorted bass. Yeah, yes, that one. And then it just culminates into the most terrifying. It sounds like the end. Oh, what's it called? Exit music for a film.
Exit music for a film.
That song, and they finally had exit music for a TV show, and it's the last song on Westworld.
I never saw that. Is that when all the people are charging?
It's when it all goes crazy at the end.
Ed Harris gets shot and he's all smiling. Mm-hmm. It's brilliant. What a brilliant TV show. I've watched it 3 times all the way through.
Okay, so I need to go and watch it again.
It's brilliant. Well, once you realise the timeline situation.
Yes, that's the thing that I didn't know.
Because Dolores crosses over all 3 of the timelines. So does Armistice. So does that girl who's the one that welcomes William into Westworld when she offers to shag him before he goes into the park,
Yes.
She's in. So there's loads of characters that look the same that are in across the 3 timelines.
Because I was thinking it just didn't make bloody sense.
Well,
there's a lot of plot holes here, and then it does once you know that that's what's going on.
But there's stuff where they make scenes out of 3 timelines, and it's just a question of a guy walks past and it cuts, and you see suddenly, because he's never left the camera, you assume that it's the same person, but he's wearing different clothes, and you just don't notice it because Jonathan Nolan, the Nolans are classic.
They love
the trick editing. They love to fuck your head up with weird edits like Inception and stuff. Where you're just not sure about what's going on.
Do you use that stuff? Does that influence music that you write and things that you create?
Oh, completely. I think that so much. Are we talking now?
Yeah, of course.
I guess we're talking.
It's the trick.
Yeah, well, I think that's the way it's supposed to be, isn't it? What have you got there recording? It's just a duet or something?
Yeah, I use...
Oh, is that Shure?
GarageBand with these wireless things. Because Ableton couldn't handle it. So for those people listening out there, don't use Ableton for long recording. GarageBand.
No. GarageBand.
Yeah.
Stable.
Very stable. Ableton, extremely unstable, but amazing for creating music. That's what I always use. What do you use? Do you a Pro Tools guy?
I'm a Logic guy.
You use Logic.
I'm a Logic guy. I used to be a Pro Tools guy, and then just the native instruments stuff is just so good.
Does that not work in Pro Tools?
I think you can get it to work if you want, but it's not. It's one of those things where
Pro Tools
when
not
you're-
intuitive for making music. It's good for recording.
Well, I
music.
definitely switched over to Logic when I was doing more composing because of using the MIDI. Obviously, is way better than Pro Tools. MIDI is just not up to it, and doing the composing string sections with like using like Vienna strings or Spitfire or something like that. Like having those in Logic and being able to change them so easily versus Pro Tools where everything was getting a bit unstable. Yeah. So the automation's good. I mean, editing is a pain in the ass in Logic compared to Pro Tools, chopping beats, chopping the broccoli. So when the broccoli truck turns up, we usually throw it into Pro Tools. If we've got to do some drums, we'll chop the broccoli in Pro Tools and then send it on over.
Bring it back in.
Send it on over, back in. No, I was going to say, doing the record that, this record in parallel, which is the name of my...
That's your new...
name of my new record.
Your new
first solo record. First record I've released under my name.
Is that exciting?
It's very exciting. I did 15 years of service, I think, which is pretty fair, I think, for the new number 2. Is that
how long that was going for?
I served in the new number 2 for 15 years. And, because it is weird being me because, when you first start off, you can't go and play in a pub in front of 4 people.
There's not going to be 4 people there.
Without the Daily Mail writing how crap you are or something. You know what I mean? It's like you don't get a chance to develop as an artist unless you do it under a pseudonym or a moniker,
I never thought about that.
Well, that's why I had the new number 2 as a sort of a faceless entity, which got confusing for people, but it was a good way of developing myself, and it allowed me to tackle all of the projects that I wanted to tackle.
Yes.
And get to the level of where I am. And once I started composing for film and TV, it was, it's hard to, I guess, get work as a faceless composer. You need to be yourself. And also, I felt like I knew who I was.
Yes.
And it
takes a really long time.
It takes a really long time in life. I got to the end of the race. And got to the end, and then I was me. And
so this is you.
So this is me. This is the first.
And it's pretty fucking wild.
It's a pretty weird record. It's definitely weird.
This is one of you. This is you now, this thing. But you can always change and do something else.
Yeah, but I think that because it was going to be a new number 2 record, and then I ended up being the only one on the spacecraft, Like usually there's like me and Ollie or me and Paul would be like lonely astronauts together, Whereas this mission was a solo mission, and I went really far out into deep space.
Yes,
and
I've heard it.
Really deep into the
full retard
unknown. Yes, exactly. And then I realized that it was just me. It was like those weird movies where
turn around and there's no one there,
where the ship has killed everyone else, and it's just you. And then I was like, wait, I'm mixing this thing, I'm mastering it and producing it. I'm doing everything, and Paul came in to do some EQing and mixing with me, but
Paul
Hicks,
yes,
who we've done like 10 records together, and we've just been working together since we started music. And he, we composed together for TV and film, and he was in the new number 2, but this was definitely not a new number 2 record. And I think that after definitely speaking with Mariki, who was on the record, and Paul Hicks, who watched me do everything by myself, they kind of both told me like, hey, this is your record. This isn't a new number 2 record. And John Bates from Big Black Delta definitely encouraged me to be the guy myself. And I think that I woke up one day and I was at the end of the race, and I realized, I'm okay with being me now.
Yes.
Like,
at what age?
37, 37. I'm 38 now, so about 30.
That sounds about right.
37, and I was like, I'm me.
Takes a long time.
I'm me, and I'm me that I want to be. I'm going to be me that I want to be, but right now I have to make some changes. And so then I was like 36, so then another couple years went by of being myself, being the better version of myself, and getting myself healthy and being really trying to become whole. And I think that was the whole point of the record, and it started from a very far out deep space place.
Yes.
And it ended back on Earth with the way that the planet is now and the current climate. And even down into like last November, I changed the record again.
We did that last song.
It was 2 songs now that weren't on the record, and one that didn't make it on the record that was then a new number 2. Now is a new number 2 song.
Okay.
So that became that because obviously the political climate, everything from international just events and war and just the state of America, the state of England, like everything, it just kind of kept the car crash and the train wreck kept happening. So I had to keep updating the record to reflect what I was feeling, and then now I think it's what it's supposed to be. It was already completed in a form earlier in the year, last year. So I'm glad that I didn't put it out because so much has happened in the last 6 months. I mean,
things are always happening to you, Dhani.
Things are happening to me all the time, but just so much happened to the world. And so much energy.
That's true, actually.
So much energy transformed. Like so many people passed away, and where do they go? All of their energy goes back into the universe, right? So then that changes the universe even more. And then all of the people that are getting killed in war, and all of the people that are dying of their own accords, and then all of the people's psychic energy of freaking out over the voting and the election and all that, and Brexit and everything. So all of that stuff had a changed.
It doesn't affect everybody, obviously, though. You must just be more in tune to it than a lot of other people.
I guess I'm sensitive. I'm very sensitive, and I feel kind of an intuition.
Yeah, because some people would just have cruised through the last year or so and wouldn't feel anything.
If you cruised through the last year or so and didn't feel anything, then A, I'm really impressed, and B, I feel sorry for you. But it's pretty impressive if you manage to do that without noticing.
There's some people
without
out there.
noticing yourself. Or I was, kind of...
People might feel a little different, but they don't know what's going on.
It's pretty strange. I think everyone really needs to get on board with the kindness and the
100%.
Knowing yourself. And so, again, back to what I was saying, being whole, right, as a person, it's surprisingly a lot harder to do than it seems. And, you always get to that point in a day where you think, I'm going to do something in the future to make myself better a person, or I'm going to start exercising, or I'm going to eat better, or I'm going to meditate more, or I'm going
and you're going to do this in the future.
Stop smoking in the future, and then you realize, okay, it takes a long time to do all of these things.
Yes.
So you have to start in baby steps, and then one day you wake up and you're there. One day you're having great meditations because you've been doing it for 2 years.
Yes.
And every day for 2 years you might have been having crap meditations, but then suddenly you've cleaned the mirror of your lens.
I've been having crap ones for 2 years, but I'm still going.
But that's the thing, don't stop.
I'm not going
Don't
to
stop because you've done the bulk lifting.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like people who, I always thought this about people who were like dancers or ballerinas, because shouldn't they all just do martial arts as well? They've already done all of the hard work.
I suppose so.
All of the training, the stretching, the kicking, the jumping, they're like ninjas. They're made to be, samurai ninjas, right? So surely they should just practice martial arts as well and they'd all be amazing. But they don't. It's weird.
But they don't, and that's the problem.
So that's the thing, is if you've been doing the good things for yourself, you can't possibly have the results unless you do the work, right? And this record is definitely a lot about becoming whole, and how do you feel inside on what is the process of becoming whole? It feels like dying. It's very strange. It feels like dying because your ego is constantly dying. and you're just constantly getting over yourself, and little bits of you are dying, and it feels horrible, like a panic attack, but it's like shedding snake skins, you know what I mean? Like you are actually killing bits of yourself, but they're the bad bits that need to go. So the process of enlightenment, or whatever we're working towards, becoming whole, not just becoming whole, but then making it out, you know, the enlightenment phase, self-realization. If you look at that process, it's not a happy, joy, smiles, everyone's becoming happier every day process. You're destroying yourself. Essentially, you're killing yourself, ego, death, you know, a little bit at a time. It's like taking poison as a ninja and becoming strong until you're impervious to poison.
Yes, yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, so
like in the Princess Bride.
Yeah, or you know, Ninja Scroll or something, whatever, you know. But to be able to do that, it's a painful thing. That's why people shy away from it. That's why people don't look at it. So it was my Meltdown, my record. So I'd put it out and I felt like I made it to a newer place of being a human on in a world that's a system that's what it is. And then I realized, okay, well, this is my solo record then. I finally got to the point where I felt like this represents who I am, not just as a band. And it's pretty mental, but it's I enjoy it, and I've been listening to it for a long time now.
What you played me sounded very interesting and exciting and different as well.
It's not a collection of songs. It's it's more like, I guess, modern classical or something. It's a graph from start to finish. There was definitely an act 1, an act 2, and an act 3, and then it kind of evolved into 2 halves. It kind of became even bigger, and then it was clearly balanced. Instead of 3 groups of 3, it was 2 groups of 5. But the arc of this, it's the story, it's the soundtrack to me. So I guess I spent so much time making soundtracks that I needed one for myself.
The modern soundtrack of your life.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the Bayer.
Well, it sounded kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And I guess the funny thing about it, who was it? I think it was. I'm not sure who my dad was quoting when he said it, but he used to say, "I've suffered for my art. Now it's your turn." You know. So that's funny, good. And to think about, you know, I've been through some rather wonderful and god-awful experiences, as everyone is on a planet and a human being in a planet. You know,
but people would expect you to be able to have like been brought up Zen. I don't know, knowing that you're George Harrison's son, do they assume you to be like Zen'd out straight away? I
don't know. I mean,
but everyone still has to live and go through shit. Doesn't matter
regardless of who you are, where you're born. I mean, I was, you know, as opposed to my dad, who became into this Beatle thing when he was 15.
He was just a little boy.
Well, just a little boy.
Wow.
But the thing is that he had that focus on him from then till the day he died, whereas I was born into this world immediately into it. So I never got that chance to just be human. I was always, you know,
Beatles baby.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, to become whole, there's a lot of other stuff that you didn't get to do, or, you know, that's why people who are kind of, a lot of the time, you know, people who've had famous parents have a really hard time, you know, because the focus is on the parent and not becoming whole as a human. So I think that to get to the end.
You don't have any brothers or sisters?
No, and I have no brothers and sisters. So I was living a lot inside my own head. My whole life. Grew up in the countryside. Love trees and walking and nature, and, you know, I love being in the mountains. I love being in the jungle. Like I love traveling, exploring. I want to be an explorer, I think.
Okay.
And you know, I was always such a huge fan of Michael Palin. and his wonderful.
I forgot about him doing that.
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
he's the last quintessential, British explorer, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's true.
His classic old pith helmet,
Can you go and be an explorer? Is that what you'd do if you weren't doing rock and roll?
I'm not just a musician. I want to be a human, and I want to discover truth about the planet, and I want to discover truth about who we are and where did we come from and where are we going to as a species, as a people. And I'm not just talking about going into space. I know we were talking about that a minute ago. I would like to go into space, but I think that there's still so much stuff on Earth that people don't know about that is that leads us back to the knowledge about where we came from as people. That, not just archaeology. I'm talking about just everything.
You're very fascinated with the stuff, YouTube videos.
I watch a lot of crazy theories on the internet, but I don't. I view everything as valid, because if you look at as much of a bunch of stuff that they're telling you in the press about celebrity or just the destabilization of information on Earth right now. We were just talking about this yesterday. There's a great documentary called HyperNormalization, and it's by a guy called Adam Curtis.
Okay.
He's an English professor, and he's done a bunch of stuff like this. Just talks about what's happened in the last 30 years, where we are, and why the conditions that are existing today on Earth, why they happened, So I find all anthropology and just the study of, I live in LA and I wake up every day and it's 75 degrees and sunny. And eventually you start asking questions. And it's funny, like, I guess
I'm not asking those questions.
You're not asking those questions.
I'm new here, so I'm just enjoying it.
Yeah, and
I don't want to know yet.
I got to a point where I just started getting all this great information started coming to me through different sources, like as if it was time that I received it,
Oh, okay.
And I guess the time in everyone's life when they get new information and choose to either do nothing with it and ignore it and carry on being an ostrich, or decide to learn more again. And I kind of always wanted to go back to university. I wanted to do lots of things, but I ended up being a musician and a composer. So I don't think of myself as just a musician and composer. I want to be an explorer as well. Because I think that's exploring inside yourself and outside in the world. That's equally as an important thing.
So you've been doing some inside.
I've been doing some inside and some outside.
What have you been doing outside? Where have you?
I've just been. I travel. I mean, my life has taken me to lots of different places.
Yes, of course.
And I think that I have this theory where you're always in the same places, but under totally different circumstances. So you'll find yourself walking down a street and you'll have a flashback to a point in your life where you'll be like, wow, last time I was here, I was feeling this, I was going through this. How much has happened since then? Who have I become? Am I a better person? Am I a worse person? And a lot of the time, the more you learn about stuff, the more heavy it gets in life. That's why people get old and go mad, or they get sad and kill themselves, or
everything we've kind of been talking about today when we're having lunch is just the older I get, the sadder I almost think it is. I'm not getting sadder myself, but I see more and more people failing and destroying themselves.
But it's also people are aging out. That's the thing, and it's if you look at it's like adapt or die. You know what I mean? You have to keep adapting as a human with your habits, with your knowledge, with the way that you speak, with everything. Because constantly, if we all spoke the way that we spoke when we were in school, we would all be politically incorrect now.
Yes.
So that's another thing. You've got to adapt or be aged out. If we all partied like we did when we were in university or out of university, then we'd all not be where we are now.
Yes.
So you have to, evolve, and it's important. It's like, it's important to I think then record that, right? So what's the story? If you're making a soundtrack, what's the best story that you can think of? It's your own life, right? And I've had a particularly interesting life. I have actually had a very bizarre,
Yes, of course.
horrifying and wonderful set of experiences, you know, but you don't want to let them define you entirely. You want to let that, okay, obviously you learn from everything, but you don't want any one particular event to traumatize you so much that stops you from learning or stops you from being a person.
I think some people just stop.
People stop.
And I could understand how you could. It could just
totally
get
understand.
terrifying, and I feel like, okay, I can't deal with it.
Yeah, it's like when you're shaking a pinball machine and it just says tilt, you know, and it stops. It just stops being a pinball machine and until you stop fucking with it, you know what I mean? And then it goes back to being a pinball machine.
Is there a final, do you have a final aim or goal or destination, a place that you want to get? Is it like pure enlightenment?
I guess so, yeah. That's what, you know, not having to reincarnate is probably the thing that that would be the best, isn't it?
Did your dad do that? Did he make it to
He made it, and
so he hasn't come back?
I don't know. Look, I mean, I don't pretend to know the inner workings of the astral world and karma and everything like that. But
he seemed pretty close, definitely.
But I have to say that he had a conscious, very, very wonderful conscious death, and I couldn't even refer to it as a death. It was an ascension, a transition. The death is a terrible description of what happened to my dad, and it was absolutely beautiful. And you know, even just a month ago, I lost my best friend, my little dog, whose name was Woody Guthrie, and he was a little husky, and he died in my arms. Didn't have to be put down. He left his body by himself.
Is he coming back, or
He's probably coming back, but he's my little spirit wolf now. So you know, there's a lot of story in here, and it's funny because before he died, he had helped me through a really bad, most difficult time in my life. Mm-hmm. And I was, you know, being very good to myself, but I just had terrible things happen to me, and it took me a long time health-wise to recover from them. Through no fault of my own. I wasn't behaving badly or anything, or you know, neglecting my health. I just had an event that took me to a place that was very bad and health-wise, and it took me a long time. I still will never physically fully recover from it. My dog was there for me, and he was there with me, and I had written a song called Ulfur, a Resurrection, which was wolf in Icelandic. And because he'd kind of brought me back into this kind of world and was such a rock for me, you know, and we became so close. He was 10 years old. But even that, just funny how, like, I'd written a song called The Light Under the Door. I'd written a song called Wolf Resurrection. And these were all parts of what had happened to me. And then, of course, you see the light under the door as a being leaves. That's what they call it. It's like you get to go up to the door and you don't get to cross over, but the other person crosses over. But you get to see the light under the door. Okay. So I'd already written a song called that. And then I experienced it. And I'd already written Wolf Resurrection. So we can hope that maybe he will come back at some point, you know. So I find that whenever I write anything with my full heart and open, and I see what's happening, I feel like a feeling, and I write a song, and it always happens. I guarantee you, everything that you will, if you're in tune like that, everything in the world that you write about will manifest into the world. And sometimes it's like you think, wow, am I tuning into that, or am I creating that? And that's where it got a little bit weird for me. And that's what kind of started me on my new path, because I started realizing, okay, I have control over, if I can gain control over myself, then I can gain control over elements of the outside world.
Well, all you really can do is gain control of yourself.
Exactly. That's the only thing you can do is change yourself. It's very, it's very matrixy, you know, when he says, like, you just realize that the truth, and then it's you that bends and not the spoon, you know, and the truth is there's no spoon. So it's like, okay, how do you bend yourself to create an outward, successful happiness life, where you let go of all the stuff that makes you unhappy and makes you sick. Genuinely let go of it, not just think you do, though, because otherwise you keep manifesting it back in, you see, on an unconscious level.
That's the hardest. I've known people who thought they had changed. But
so many people think that they've cured themselves or changed, and really it's just a Band-Aid, you know, and it's all still, the mud's all still there under the surface of the water.
How do they properly do it? They think they're doing it.
Well, the thing is,
so difficult.
I guess it's just a trial and error. It's like we were saying how that quote from Westworld, the human race has been forged using one tool, the mistake.
Yes.
You know, and that's the only thing humans have had.
So we just have to make them.
So you keep having to make mistakes until you're at the end of the race.
Yeah.
Until you cross the finish line and you're like, I don't need to make any of those mistakes anymore.
Yeah. And then you still might just make them once more.
Oh yeah, but you still make another mistake that comes from an area that you've never even experienced before. And you're in a whole other arena.
I never used to quite get the alcoholic who's been sober 20 years and then mucks up later on with wine. It's like, but no, that's very, very possible to
everything that anyone suffers from. You know, the world is a myriad of different pitfalls, traps, and tricks. And you know, sometimes you can gain control. I'm not saying that you ever have control, but you have the ability to create just as much as the universe does, because we're all made from the same stuff, right? So when a wish becomes a will, that's when it becomes real, you know? And it just manifests through because there's enough atoms to make anything you can ever imagine.
It's just, you've got to will it.
It's just got to be
in the right way, maybe.
Yeah, and you've got to have no selfish attachment to it, you know?
I think Jesus said if you believe you can move the mountain, you can, or something. Like, yeah.
But also, it's like, are you doing it for your benefit, or are you doing it purely for creating? And that's the thing. It's like, I feel like I made this record as therapy for myself, to get me from where I was to where I am now. And I feel like, even though I've experienced so much pain, and I have still flashes of it, and anxiety or happiness that's so overwhelming that you can't even deal with it, like trying to stay in the middle, you know, and just be like, slow and steady wins the race, you know?
Yeah, that's what I try as much as I can these days, to stay in the middle.
Slow and steady wins the race, you know? The Jackie Stewart approach to driving around Monaco is the slowest way around Monaco is the fastest, you know? Just go around Monaco nice and steady, and you'll win the race. No, but I think that this record is kind of like, in the old days when you used to have the Battle of Hastings or whatever, and then you see the guy on the horse, and you know he gets hit in the Harold gets hit in the eye with an arrow, and then the guys are coming. So you see the document of what happened. Yeah. This is like my version of that. It's like if it was old times, it would be a tapestry, but it looks like a tapestry when you put it in your Logic sessions. So it's kind of like weaving all these colors and tracks and sounds into each other.
Are you going to have any sort of visual thing to go along?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on right now, which is still changing. It's been very difficult to try and represent the issues that I want to tackle in this with live action. I've looked to stop animation. I was trying to collaborate with, and it may still happen, with Seth Green. Who has Robot Chicken and Stupid Buddy Studios.
Those guys are great.
Those guys are fantastic, and they are very, very wonderful people, fun, intelligent, and just like really, really, they mastered their craft. Yes. And their studios was one of the most fun. So I wanted to there was a stop animation piece, there was a live action piece, there was an cell animation piece. I actually collaborated with a good friend from the countryside in England, who was a writer called James Scudamore, who was nominated for the Man Booker Prize, and he's a young guy, our age, and loved
young guy, our age.
Our age. Well, we're not like, he's not like our parents' generation.
Yeah.
And he wanted to see what would happen, because I gave him the record when it was in its old form, and he listened to it, and then he wrote the backstory to the characters.
Right, okay.
So I told him about the 3 characters. There's 3 or 4 characters that are repeatedly, and they were real people that existed in my life, not in the way that you would imagine, but they were kind of 4 energies that turned up in my life, and it was that whole thing about having a victim, a persecutor, and a rescuer. And it's the classic writing triangle, you know, and he was telling me about it. And I was just saying, well, that's funny because these 3 characters, that's the way that they fit. And the persecutor thinks she's the victim, and the victim thinks she's the persecutor, and the rescuer is actually the victim, you know. So everyone in the world is one of these 3, but are we the ones that we think we are, you know?
I like that.
And then at some point we all become these different elements of our psyche, personality, or we take on different traits. And the goal is to not be any of them, is to be right in the middle, you know, like I guess in China they call it Wuji, which is like the point right in the center of the yin yang, you know, like right in the middle.
I think people are afraid of being right in the middle because it feels like you have no emotion.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Or you have every emotion.
You're just in control of all of them.
Exactly. You're not getting swayed.
That's a better way to look at it.
Yeah. So, you know,
but I think people are afraid of not being able to get...
Feelings are more positive. Emotions are generally more negative. You know, emotions are downward negative energies, and feelings are generally positive. So you want to kind of avoid emotions, I guess, but how do you do that if you're alive, you know? So it's interesting.
Good
so
luck.
like I've really just been getting to know myself. I kind of figured that I'd got to a place in my life, and I guess I'd plateaued, and then I woke up again. And
at the same sort of age that your dad did? Is it the same sort of... I'm just trying to see if there's any...
guess he was younger. No,
Little younger.
I mean, think about it. The Beatles...
But at that time, it was sort of the same... Younger was the same as
same
us.
Proportionate age.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And through a series of similar circumstances, and, you know, my dad and I were always like twins. We always had a similar path. So I looked, you know, I always saw, after he left his body, I saw what could be possible. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, how do we get from here to there, you know? And how do you do music and do art and be, you know, this shift has definitely become more authentic. And I definitely think that the shift is going away from just vapid bullshit.
I hope so.
Well, it better be, because
we can do it.
We're in a different time now, and it's important to, you know, be authentic. Anything that's authentic can stay and can adapt and evolve, but if it's just...
I completely agree.
It's got to be like that, and
I think we need to be in charge of this movement.
Yes.
And there'll be plenty others who are trying to do the same thing.
I think that, you know...
It seems to be happening. I'm seeing it a little...
It's been a very polarizing last year. You can see a lot of people chose the darkness, and a lot of people chose the light.
Yes.
You know?
And always back to Star Wars.
Yeah, it's always back to Star Wars. Everything always comes back to Star Wars. And we had 2 new Star Wars films in the last for the first time since old Darth Vader became Darth Vader, you know.
That's right.
Since Revenge of the Sith.
Yes. Are you're gonna now have to put an album out into this current musical climate of social media, Instagramming, doing all this?
Someone said to me, actually, a good friend said to me, I'm making my record and I feel like I'm just getting I might as well just go to the factory, press all of the records, get them in a big dumper truck, and then back it up to the cliff and just dump it in the ocean. because that's how many people are going to hear my record. And I totally feel the same way. Like, I know that, you know, this is back to what I was saying. It's like when, and I like this analogy. This is how I was trying to think about, you know, I've suffered for my work now. Now it's time for you to suffer. It's like very much like I had an experience. It's like, you know, Batman, right? So he's in this cave and he's scared shitless of the bats. And then he thinks, okay, you know, goes up to the mountain and faces the trippy bat fear.
Yes.
And decides that he's Batman because it's the thing that terrifies him the most. And
so what are you?
well, I don't know, but I mean, it's like, you know, that's the new number 2. That's what it was, because I was always, you know, I remember the new number 2 was started. That's always been my approach. You know, it's like The Prisoner. You know, you can't beat something that changes the whole time. So, you know, if you're trying to get out of the village and every day the new number 2 is a different person, you've got to start again from scratch. You're never going to get out because you've got an enemy that you can't fight. So taking that on as being my totem was being like, yeah, you can judge me and you can pigeonhole me all you want and, you know, look at my name or whatever you want to do. But if I keep evolving like a person, you can't possibly do that to me, you know? So it's like if Batman became Batman and because he was scared of, and so all of the things, it's like, then he turned that against his enemies. So like, you know, this record is like taking all the stuff that's happened to me and turning it back against itself, you know, like I want it to be genuinely upsetting.
Yeah, it sounded.
It's pretty upsetting, and but there's a lot of positivity in it, and you know, I've had some wonderful people come and play on it, and you know, we found Moriarty, the singer who plays the girl role in the thing, and then the other girl role is played by Camilla Gray, who is from and Big Black Delta. Mm-hmm. John Bates, whose band I've been playing in. I've been playing in a band with Moriarty. I've been playing in a band with John Bates. So I was highly influenced by John's previous album, Traga Mi Tierra. And that record really, he was making at the same time. I love that record, and that kind of went into the firmament, you know, into the brain tank and stewed around for a while.
As it does.
And Davide Rossi, previously of Goldfrapp and you know, every band in the world, The Verve, Coldplay.
Love that guy.
You would know him from the, you know, Viva La Vida, the strings.
I met him at the studio with you that day.
Lovely guy.
Very, very nice guy.
And he was also having a time in his life where he'd been going through a lot of transitions and change, and he ended up living with me for a while. And we, you know, his band Black Submarine, I think, had kind of split up. And so the shadow of Black Submarine, which I love, which is Davide's side of it, the like distorted violins and like really dark kind of Bristol sound is in there, because that's kind of, I grew up loving, you know, Portishead, Massive Attack, Tricky. I was a huge Tricky fan, and Martina Topley-Bird and all of the great singers that were on Massive Attack, from Liz Frazier down to, you know, Shara Nelson, to all of that just is in my bones, and Radiohead, obviously. So I thought that, you know, Davide, working on it, because we've been composing and doing films and TV together, to get his strings, you know, to him to perform some of the stuff that I'd written, and then him to combine efforts, and him to collaborate with me on a few tracks. And his arrangements are just, you know, that's the difference between anything I've done before and this record. It's definitely got more of a classical feel. Still, I don't think I even used a guitar amp on this record. Really? And people get pissed off about that, you know. People will say, how dare you, you know, with all the stuff that your dad left you never even used.
But then he's done it, now you can do something else.
Well, I didn't need to, you know, for the sound that I was looking for, I didn't need an amp. And
is that a comment? I mean, I guess you must have faced a bit of that sort of stuff of people, everything that you would do musically is compared to
completely.
All the time.
But I mean, how do you compare anything to the Beatles? I mean, they did everything.
Yeah, it's done.
So it's done. It's like you gotta get over that. Like anyone who's still on that trip needs to just go, okay, well, music is, there's only however many notes.
13.
13 H. Yeah. The Germans had H back in the day. They did. They had H back in the day.
That's the 13th note.
Yeah. And, even just like realizing that, certain things in the universe have just been designed to not be good for you, like frequencies and stuff, like just getting to a place where you're like, okay, now I have to start relearning everything. I studied physics at school and going back to then think, well, is any of this stuff, accurate? And starting again and relearning everything and doing it whilst making a record. So every time I'd learn something new, I would be putting it in the record. And then a lot of stuff I would be writing and it would then come to me. Like I'd called it out of the space. So it's a very weird record, this, for me. And I was in a very in tune place when I made it. So it's, I hope it's genuinely disturbing.
Yes. And I guess finally, what is it? What purpose do you think it is as musicians or artists we serve for the population or for the planet? What is it that we and why do we sort of do it? What drives everyone to do it? What?
For me, I think it's questions and asking questions. Like I watch a lot of TV shows because I composed a lot of TV shows soundtracks, and I became obsessed with like films like, actually, to be honest, a lot of the Nolan's work from, Inception through to like Interstellar really sparked a lot of...
That's what's his name?
Christopher Nolan.
No, but the music.
Oh, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack.
Zimmer, yeah.
I love that soundtrack. It was a fantastic soundtrack. Interstellar, but like things even down to looking at just watching Anthony Hopkins in Westworld, and watching... just what having read Bran Stark's storyline in Game of Thrones, and everything is going way more towards the meta. It's like someone was saying to me last night, we're not even in postmodern world, it's like meta modern now, like we're past postmodern, and you know what I mean, because everything is meta, everything is interdimensional now. So like, well, the consciousness of what stuff is out there. So I'd been feeling a bit weird about interdimensional stuff anyway, and then I became, I get obsessive with TV shows and I watch them over and over again, and even just like the whole concept of a robot waking up, or just there's so many great things to think about that people don't think about, from Ex Machina to to Interstellar, and
so is it just thinking up something, whatever it is, and then putting it out into the world for other people to share your thoughts?
I think
with
so,
you?
Yeah. Or it's like, what does the world think about this, And like, if you look at media and social media and stuff, there's just such crap questions that people are asking.
That's why I started this podcast, was to just actually really get to talk to people without... I did so many interviews with my band Miami Horror, and I just asked the dumbest things. Like, why don't we just start talking? We'd have a way better interview.
Honestly, and it's like, journalism, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to have a knock at anyone because everyone's just doing the best they can, but to be perfectly honest, like...
Some of them aren't doing the best they can.
Are they?
Sorry.
Maybe they're not. But, just, I think it's important for everyone to keep learning stuff. And also there's just a whole, with the internet and with TV even having such a huge budget these days, you get to see things like Game of Thrones. It's like very thought-provoking for me, and Westworld, things like that. These things are if you can go as deep down the rabbit hole with stuff like that as you want to, and I spend a lot of time down that rabbit hole looking for interesting things that you can bring into your life that are going to enrich you with knowledge and stuff. And, not just reading novels giving your mind up to read someone else's life.
It's changed now where these TV shows are the new novels. It feels like they're written so intelligently by incredible writers with such unique philosophical modern ideas, but borrowing from the past as well. That it's like,
well, it's brilliant. You know, like even just to name check, you know, Ramin Djawadi, who did the score for Game of Thrones and Westworld. Even just hearing those scores, like for example, listening to Anthony Hopkins play Claire de Lune, and then going, oh wow, I'm going to go and listen to everything Debussy ever did, and obsess on Debussy for a week, and then fall into a dream on your couch listening to Debussy, and wake up with Debussy in your cells, you know? And it's like, I feel better for having done that, you know? And listen, or just becoming obsessed with like one piece of classical music, you know? Or like,
well, I guess we're all suffering the human condition.
Yeah.
So art is just there for everyone to share their beauty, their pain, their thoughts with other people, and
I think
throw it across the world to anyone else who wants to try and you just decipher it and find it.
A great man once told me that you're only as good as your story, you know? And if you're not telling a good story, like Bob Dylan, great storyteller, you know?
Yes.
But if you're not telling a story, you're just making noise, essentially. And if you know,
there's a lot of people making noise.
Well, and there's a lot of TV that's just making noise, and there's a lot of films that are just making noise, and there's a lot of people that are just making noise. But like, good art is supposed to reflect its time, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you don't like it, it's got to give you an emotional response, and it's got to. That's why I'd be equally as happy to get 0 stars from Rolling Stone as I would be to get 3, which everyone seems to get.
Yes,
because
you want 5 or 0.
Exactly. I don't. You know, I want the record to upset people, not upset them in a good way, upset them into maybe asking a question about who they are or whatever. You know.
Yeah, you want to be polarizing with your art. It's a really nice thing to do, instead of just being insipid and sitting safely in the middle.
Yeah, don't upset the ratio, man.
Yeah.
You know, don't rock the boat. They don't want you to do that.
Rock the fucking boat.
No, I'd
shake it.
Yeah,
tip it over.
I just like, you know, I'm not Rage Against the Machine or anything. One of my favorite bands of all time.
One of the greatest bands of all time.
I think that we play this game in the studio where we're trying to work out, and this, you can ask your listeners this, and listeners, anyone who's listening out there to this podcast, what do you think about this? This is a game we tried to play, which is who's got the best debut album of all time? Of our generation and then of all time. And you reckon
it's Rage Against the Machine?
Well, in our generation,
I'm not going to argue with you.
It could be like, it could actually be definitely maybe from Oasis, which was a great debut album.
I've just been listening to that in the last few days. It's really good.
It's really good. Or Rage Against the Machine. I mean, to come out of the gate with that album, and it was recorded in like a day live.
Was it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Those guys went in, they practiced the songs, and they dropped that record. And you know, that might be, and the only other one was, oh God, there was another one. But Answers on a Postcard to what is the greatest debut album? Led Zeppelin?
No.
See, it's not. It's
but then we've gone back too far.
But it's not the Beatles. It's not the Stones. It's like if you look at the band, in relation to where it was standing at that point.
Well, I think for me, Rage Against the Machine is one of the greatest bands of all time because they've got 4 records. They were spanned across quite a large period of time. They didn't. Once it turned to Audio Slave, it wasn't Rage Against the Machine anymore.
Yeah.
So they left this perfect legacy, and when they reformed, they didn't make a new record. They only reformed for a tour. They haven't put a foot wrong.
No.
And I'm hoping that they don't make a new album, or if they do, I reckon it will be really good.
I mean, if you listen to the new Zach De La Rocha stuff...
Is it sounding good?
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he did with Run the Jewels. I mean, everything that guy does is...
Yeah, he doesn't fuck around.
No.
He
doesn't mess around, that guy.
No.
So yeah, back to that. So yeah, we can all hope that, you know, it's funny, like I took 15 years to make a record with my own name on it because I'm not worried about that anymore. So let's see how that one works out.
I'm excited.
Maybe I'll just go back to being number 2. And, you know, I can only make records the way that I make records. So if anyone doesn't like it, then that's fine. You can not like it.
It's nice to hear you're at peace with it at this point in time to just go forth and be Danny Harrison.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm
It's
excited
interesting.
for you.
We'll see where the visual side of this goes, and we'll see where it takes us, hopefully to some festivals near you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Danny, very much for taking the time.
Nice one. This fun.
Thanks, Danny. Oh, it was great to sit down with that guy. I enjoy his company a lot. I've been spending a bit of time with Danny. He's a very pleasant chap. He's preaching the good gospel of kindness and, you know, being warm to each other. He's continuing that tradition that his family and that the Beatles set, and I think it's a really important time, you know, more than ever. I think that needs to be out there, that message of love and warm-spiritedness to your fellow human being and to animals as well, of course, and the planet, all of that. So check out Danny Harrison. The record is called In Parallel. A couple of my favorite songs. I mean, I love the first track, Never Know. There's a single, All About Waiting, which came out, and then there's another song on there called Summertime Police, which is pretty badass. And just to, you know, blow my own trumpet. There's a song called The Admiral of Upside Down, which I'm playing lead bass on. So check it out. You got the old J-Boy thrumming away on the Hoffner there. So cop that. I really like the sound of the record. It might not be what you expect, which I think is cool. You know, maybe you're thinking you're going to get a whole bunch of acoustic songs. Well, you're not bloody going to get that at all, frankly. So go in with an open mind, and I think you'll be very, very pleasantly surprised. It's cool. He's done a lot of hard work to get that record into existence, and I think that's great. Thank you very much, Danny. Okay, that's all for today's episode. Geez, what else? I don't know. I got nothing else to add. I've said it all. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to try and be back more regularly, so I'm arranging more interviews as we speak. You just stick around. Trust your old Uncle Jay. He'll be back with more. Take care. Goodbye.